So I understand we have a call already lined up. We have, is it Michael in San Diego?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me, Mr. Baker?
Yeah. I'm glad you're there. So what have you got for us today?
Well, I was curious. A couple months ago, back in April, May, even a bit into June, a couple of articles were circulating around the internet, basically indicating that one of the reasons Christians dislike atheism is due to the stark reminder of the finality of death. And I'm wondering what you think atheism can do to address this issue a little bit better. And I'd like to listen to your thoughts and then possibly even have a follow-up.
Okay. Well, you know, there often is this topic of how do we market atheism and how do we make it more appealing, and this is certainly an issue where maybe we can't compete with the message that hey, you're gonna go to some happy place after you die and everything is good. I guess from our perspective, we view that as kind of wishful thinking, and that there isn't really any evidence for that sort of, that belief is true. But yet, yes, people may want to cling to a comforting belief, especially this idea that they may reunite with their loved ones after they die, and these sorts of things. And personally, I sort of value the truth. I value things that we can get at with evidence, and things that we're not, where we're pretty confident we're not deluding ourselves into thinking of, things that might feel good but aren't necessarily true. And in a way, it's kind of a mindset that I think we want to encourage in people. I would rather have atheists in the movement and who are outspoken and such, who are atheists for the right reasons. And I'm a little concerned about marketing for marketing's sake, although it is true that there are often ways of sort of marketing the truth in a way that you can make it appealing, and you can give a sort of emotional appeals to things too. So I guess my feeling is that you might want to walk the fine line there. How does that sound?
Not too bad. I mean, the kind of thing I run into is, although granted a placebo is just sugar, there is sometimes a noticeable placebo effect that can, not always, but can have a benefit. And people like Mr. Sam Harris have touched on this, that without addressing this fear of death, we will always have this lean towards the supernatural, because, I mean, in my opinion, from a very young age, we're taught to, like Pavlov's dogs, to have an answer to every question.
Right.
So, where do you go when you pass? We got to have an answer. It may not be the right answer, and in my opinion, for most believers, it is not the right opinion, but we have to have an answer, and that answer leads us to the benefits, potentially, of that placebo effect.
Yeah. And I think people are uncomfortable not having an answer, and religion is happy to jump in and give, God did it, or whatever the answer might be.
Well, correct. I mean, the three dirtiest words in, I think, our movement, but I think they're very good words, are "we don't know."
I wouldn't call them dirty. You should be proud when you don't know, and admit it, and take that as an opportunity to learn and grow.
No, I think it's a fantastic thing. But no, seriously, if you don't know the answer, I think that's where you need to live up to the truth of your position and say, listen, I don't know the answer. But believers take that as the dirtiest word. How can't you know you're going to paradise? How can't you know you're loved by a God? How can't you, because like I said, from very young age, because the schooling system taught to have an answer, have an answer, have an answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, there's nothing wrong with saying, where do we come from? I don't know. Where do we go when we die? I don't know.
Right.
But until I will only speak for myself, until I'm given sufficient evidence that I can feel comfortable with, and that is viewable by all individuals, sufficient evidence to move me to position of there is a God, there's actually no reason to believe in that opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a related issue, and that is that some theists are uncomfortable with the fact that science is moving. Right, we're learning more as time goes on, and what we thought we knew at one point in time may be different at a later point in time. For example, we've recently discovered some new fossils of some hominids.
Oh yes, that was fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, and it's a big deal, and it sort of helps to shape a better understanding of our human origins. But from a theistic standpoint, it's like, oh, well, science was wrong, or science is wrong because it's changing its mind. And,
No.
And I want to hold on to religion because
Science,
it's giving me a constant answer, right?
Correct. Science is modifying its position based on the evidence given to them. And I think that's a good thing. To say something was written in stone based off potentially a book that we don't even know who it was written by, I just think it backs you into a corner.
Yeah.
There's no room to modify your position because how are you supposed to challenge the supposed mind of God? I mean, it's just it's kind of it is a fantastic story. It's interesting, but once again, it's not based on I don't think any good proof. And what if you do find evidence that would shake the foundations of what you had hoped was written in stone?
Yeah.
But then that's when you see apologists start to do the dance. Well, it means this. It doesn't mean that.
Right.
Well, I mean,
right.
What is your barometer to test your position? You don't have one because you don't have evidence to the core of your belief. And it kind of gives them wiggle room to pull anything they want out of the hat, which is just unfortunate, but it's something we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's one of my frustrations with the Bible and such is that it's setting aside the question of truth or not. It's subject to a lot of interpretation because it's wisps of stories that where you're required to bring a lot to it yourself and read into it what it means and these sorts of things. And if you look at the fact that there are tens of thousands of branches of Christianity, they're all disagreeing on how different interpretations and many of them core theological interpretations. You come away with, oh, well, this is a Rorschach test of some sort, and people are just reading into it what they want to.
Correct. My favorite one is that when the fundamentalist apologists are saying, well, God cannot do evil. How do you know?
Right.
I mean, why, if he can do anything and everything, I mean, if we use kind of like the basic omnipotent, omniscient, omnipotent definition of a God, well, how do you know he can't do evil? Just saying, well, God's good doesn't mean anything, especially when our only connection to the God opinion is the Bible. And the Bible doesn't have a single consistent message. I don't care how you read it. I don't care if you read it in context, out of context. I don't care if you read it, chapter here, chapter there, or beginning and completely through. If I want to love my fellow man, yeah, not a problem. I can find a passage that will say, yes, love your fellow man and all fellow men.
Yeah.
But if I want to go out and, let me be blunt. If I actually wanted to go out, and I do not, if I wanted to go out and slaughter a homosexual, I can quote you chapter and verse.
Sure.
And so to sit there and say that God is the ultimate moral figure and has a consistent moral standard, Well, I'll tell you what. Even if he did, God is the worst communicator on the planet. I mean, let's face it. If I can, in his supposedly error-free, divinely inspired Word of God, write such a mess, I just don't see how people can say there's a consistent message to it.
Sure.
Without knowing that they are, well, full of themselves.
Yeah, and Thomas Paine made this point in The Age of Reason about 200 and some odd years ago, and he made it very eloquently, and I highly recommend folks check that out and you know, get into the mind of an atheist, or actually he was a deist, but he certainly argued that that a God would never use a written communication as a way of conveying a message. And he did so very eloquently, and I really admire that thought process and his guts for going after that question.
Yes, and I believe your co-host, Mr. Dillahunty, has even mentioned that too. I mean, what is the worst way you can give your divine message is through languages that have died thousands of years ago, and just a complete lack of decent historical record keeping on what someone would say is the most important person to ever walk the planet. I just think is hilarious.
Yep. Yep.
I saw a debate between Dr. Richard Carrier and, forgive me, I forget the Christian apologist's name, but I asked him, I said, you know, how do you account for the lack of record keeping for what a Christian would say is the most important being to ever walk the earth? And his excuse was, well, you know, back then paper was hard to get. I'm paraphrasing. I am paraphrasing.
Well, paper was hard to get, but that's a lame excuse, isn't it?
Well, I mean, think about if you think about their position, they basically say, well, this was a. My apologies. I was actually corrected, and the person thought it was cute, but I'll go with the correction. This is the one and only time the one and only God walked the earth. Could walk on water, water into wine, all these miracles. Supposedly brought the dead back to life. Supposedly himself came back to life. But you want to know something? Obtaining a piece of papyrus was too hard to do.
Right.
And that just floored me. I said, that's it. You know, he could do all this amazing stuff that you say through your studies, you know, is absolutely true. He was surrounded by 12 men. You think one of the ones he would have picked would have been a scholar that had access to paper.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the incompetence of their God is beyond me.
Right, right.
I mean, it's just, it's error after error after poor judgment after poor judgment. And I just don't understand, with such a lack of evidence, why they need it. And that kind of goes back to what I originally called. Once again, I think it is just this stark reminder that, sadly, this is your one and only time on the roller coaster.
Yep.
And it's going to be a fun ride, and I hope it is for most people. I think part of it is, too, is they are looking for, a lot of people, I think, are looking for a reward for a mediocre life. I mean, it's a shame we are in such a big system where most people get up in the morning, go to work, come home, have dinner, watch a little TV, and go to bed, and repeat it day after day after day, and their lives aren't really amazing or something that they really get a lot out of. And I think they're going, well, you know what, if I can just get through this, if I can just get through these 80 years of just monotony, oh, there'll be cookies and candy waiting for me.
Right. Well, and we're living in a pretty decent time. A lot of folks have a lot of comforts that they didn't have 50
Correct.
or 100 or 1,000 years ago.
But even with these comforts, I think there's this sometimes of a mindset of, and once again, I think this is the believer's mindset, you know, this is nice and all, but there's something better coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's unfortunately they get stuck in that mentality. But sir, I have taken up a tremendous amount of your time. I'd like to thank you for taking.
Sure. Well, I appreciate your call.
Question. What I have to ask, you're alone there. You got ditched.
I'm alone. Well, I've got a pal that is just coming in right now to help me out.
Hello, pal.
John Iacoletti. So.
It's kind of funny you say that, and there's a delay, of course, on the video to our conversation. I'm thinking, oh, a magical friend.
A magical friend. So thank you very much, Michael.
Hey, thanks a lot.
I appreciate your call.
Real quick. I like the new studio. I like the new format, and the quality has been, I think, greatly improved. I know your team had some bumps in the beginning, but I think they should stick with it. I like it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, we appreciate the feedback on the technical issues. We have had, it's a challenge to get the show like this kind of all the kinks worked out because it's a lot of moving parts and such.